Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling, Pretty Boy Doug Summers. Thanks for being here today with us.
You're more than welcome.
My very first question to you would be is how you got started in the wrestling business.
I got started in the wrestling business at the age of 9. I went to my father took me to my first match in Minneapolis, and I watched the show. I really liked it. And then I realized that the ring had to be set up every Saturday. And I went down there one morning on Saturday, and I waited for 3 hours for the guy to show up with the ring truck. I asked him if I could help. I got in, got a free ticket, and started putting the rings up on weekends.
So where'd you grow up? What town again?
Minneapolis.
So you're a big AWA, Gagne.
Always
Right.
been there all my life.
I guess could you tell us more about putting up the ring as a teenager for Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling?
I didn't put it up for the Mid-Atlantic. I did all my, I put the ring up for Vern Gagne in the early 60s. And in the late 60s, I went to Kansas City for Bob Geigel and put the ring up there for a while until the ring went by my car one night and went over a ditch and down an embankment 40 feet. They didn't get over too good, but I had fun.
So you pretty much knew you wanted to get into the business from the early get-go.
Oh yeah, from the first time I saw wrestling, I said that's it. That's all I focused on. I stopped hanging around with my buddies, stayed in the basement, just studied wrestling, watched tapes, and that's all I did. They made fun of me because that's all I did on weekends, and I just loved it. That was all that was on my mind.
I guess how did you get into the sport? How did the boys take you under their wing and mentor you?
Well, at first it was hard, but once I started putting the ring up and they got to know me, they liked me, and some of them would get in the ring with me and fool around, show me how the holds are, hurt me a little bit, let them know it was serious. Back then it was very serious. I had a smile on my face one day and it got slapped off real quick, and I understood don't smile.
Right.
So it was vicious back then, and the guys that were around back then was Race and Henning and the Vachon brothers, the Kamelkoff brothers, Pampero Firpo. These were all great old-time wrestlers that it was serious business.
Right.
And I had to learn at a young age, being a young kid, that it was a business, and I had to be very serious about everything I did, how I presented myself. I had to go from being a 10, 11-year-old into a man and act like that when I was around them. So I never acted like a kid.
I was going to ask you, did any of the guys give you an extra hard time since you were so young?
No, I really got along good with them because, believe it or not, putting up a ring is very important, because if the ring's put up wrong, they get hurt, you're going to get hurt. They're going to come back and they're going to say, who put the ring up? And that happened to me one time. Ray Stevens, I put a ring up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the boards were out a little bit, and he stepped in it, and he had the belt, and he was making $250,000 a year, and he twisted his ankle, and he came back in the dressing room, and he just chewed me out. I thought he was going to kill me, and I realized right then that the ring had to be perfect. Your playground has to be flat and perfect, and I learned from that day, never put up a bad ring.
I guess Harley Race, was he pretty much the person that mentored you?
Harley Race was a great help to me. He took me under his wing. I worked in Kansas City, brought me to Kansas City to learn more down there, and I did, and I was wrestling down there and getting trained. Then as I got into the wrestling, Harley brought me down to Florida in the early 70s, it was 71, and he brought 5 of the best wrestlers in the world down there at one time to teach me how to wrestle and to hurt me. And I mean hurt me, they hurt me real bad. And it was called shooting. And I had Tony Charles, I had Bob Roop, I had Matsuda, Carl Gotch,
Wow.
a guy named, a great Englishman named John Foley, skinny guy, buggy whip arms, potbelly, but he could tie you up in a million ways, and he hurt me every Tuesday. I went down there for an hour and a half and just got the dog shit kicked out of me.
Stretch you and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. But it was a great lesson, because Race brought me down there to learn. So when we went to a bar or went out, and if somebody made a smart comment about wrestling, if you didn't address the problem, they would, and then the next day I would have to be back in a pit, and they would just tear me a new asshole, and
Wow.
they did.
Huh.
So I learned wrestling was respect. The word meant everything, and if you didn't stand up for it, you would have a bad day. Back then it was pure business. I mean, when the marquee said wrestling, that's exactly what they wanted to see, and that's what they got. And Race brought me down there for that one reason, for a year, to be trained by the best, and I did.
What are your memories of Eddie Graham since you worked in Florida?
Eddie Graham was good. Eddie was a vicious man. He at the pit, that it was called the pit, on Tuesdays, professional football players and bodybuilders and that would come down there and sign a release form, and they would be cocky and arrogant, and Eddie would stand in the corner with his arms like this, and if he didn't like the guy, he blink an eye or drop an arm. If he blinked the eye, broke an arm. If he dropped his arm, his leg would be going out, and they couldn't do anything because they signed a release, and those boys were crawling to get out of there, and they could never get out of the ring. They just kept them in there and just beat them to dog.
Wow.
But I was going through it, so I had no compassion for them at all. You want to open your mouth back then, you got hurt real bad.
Wow. I guess, how big was kayfabe back then in the 70s?
It was that way all the way into the late 80s. At least with me, it's been always that way. My family never knew anything about the business, and it was better. And if you said something to a person and another guy heard it, you're going to have a bad day. Back then, they just slapped the dog shit out of you. It was taboo. I mean, old school. Those wrestlers came from the 50s and the 60s, and there was no playing games there. If someone walked in the dressing room that wasn't supposed to be there, you didn't know, kayfabe came up, whatever you were saying stopped, dead in its tracks. And it went that way all the way into the early 90s, and then a whole new breed came about.
Right. From back in the Florida, or when you were with Harley, any good road stories?
Oh yeah, Harley had a Trans Am that was hot back then. He souped it up, put about $8,000 in the motor, and we would go from Tampa to Jacksonville, just running it flat out. And Rocky Johnson was down there, and Rocky went to a Corvette dealership or a Chevy dealership, and got a Corvette he was going to buy, but he wanted to test drive it, and he took it to Jacksonville, and him and Race dragged all the way home, and when Rocky brought the car back, it was blowed up.
Wow.
A brand new Vet. I mean, we laughed our asses off,
Huh.
because he thought that Vet was hot. Didn't stand a chance for that Trans Am.
Right.
It was hot.
How did you wind up start training for the ring? You actually refereed a little bit, right, too?
I refereed off and on for 5 years. I refereed for Vern for a year and a half. Went up to Kansas City for about 9 months, and then I went up to. I was up in New York State, in Buffalo for Pedro Martinez and Johnny Powers, and the Sheik up there. And I refereed, and when I wasn't reffing, I was wrestling.
Right. What do you remember of the Sheik, the original Sheik?
Oh, he was scary. I mean, I was still learning, and I was, he just scary, and he was good.
He lived his gimmick pretty much, right?
24/7.
Right.
That's what I learned back then. You lived your gimmick, and that's what I did. That's how I was raised, and that's how I did it. I wasn't sociable with people. I was hardcore, and that's the way I was educated. And I liked it because it just gave me more power to myself, knowing what I could do and back it up if I had to, because that's the training that I was given, and I never forgot it.
What helped you as a referee that you used later on to become a good worker?
Well, I've refereed some of the greatest guys in the world: Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson, Nick Bockwinkel, Harley Race, Dory Funk Jr. I just learned so much being in the ring and watching them move, and how they wrestled, and how things came together, and how it really meant that at that time, and even into up to 90, it was all done spontaneous. As it came into our head, it was done in the ring, and that's what was so great. Wrestling back then was compiled in the ring. It wasn't scripted, or you just went out there and you just knew what you had to do, and you were always 20 moves or 30 moves ahead, and it was a big puzzle, and you put that one piece in the middle, and you start drawing your picture, and that's how I learned, and it was the best training in the world.
As far as psychology goes and learning how to bump, who was pretty much the guy behind that who taught you that? Would it be?
That was Harley Race and Ray Stevens. They were the two greatest bump takers in the business. Ray came from the West Coast, and he was a fantastic bump man, and Harley was bar none but the best in the business, and I learned from him, and that's how I learned how to bump, when to do it, and he would sit there and watch me wrestle, and he would say, "You're taking 50 bumps." He says, "For what?" He says, "Start thinking, use your psychology and philosophy of what you want to do to the crowd and the people." And I eliminated 45 to 46 bumps and brought it down to 2 and 3. And I found out 2 and 3 was done the right time, right place, meant more than taking 50. And I learned a lot that way.
Now, you actually had some early matches with Danny Miller. What are your memories of working with Danny?
Danny was old school. He was hard, and I loved it. Back then, they gave you no quarter. When they locked up with you and wrestled, they put you down on the mat, and they would hurt you. See how much you would want to learn, and you had to learn how to wrestle. You had to learn how to fight. You had to learn how to hit. It was awesome. They were all good teachers to me. All these guys that I grew up with as a young boy, I ended up wrestling. In every match I had with every wrestler, I always took something home with me.
Now, was it harder or easier to be taken seriously by the boys who knew you as a ring crew kid?
I think it was easier because they respected what work had to be done to put the ring up. Because you would have to drive 300-400 miles a day, put the ring up, and then go referee or wrestle and then take it down. So I got the respect because I worked hard.
Right.
Nothing was given to me. I always had to fight for everything I got, and it didn't bother me that I didn't get a lot of recognition, but I did get recognition one way, that I could pick up the phone and go anywhere in the United States by one phone call and be there the next day because of what I could do.
What about Leroy McGurk? You worked for him. What was it like working for Leroy?
Leroy was a great guy. I ended up marrying his daughter. Bad mistake, but it was a great experience. I was there 4 years. I was assistant booker, and I wrestled and put the ring up, sold the tickets. I did everything, and I did TV. I had to do the dubbing and everything. It was just a great experience.
Was Leroy a fair booker when he booked?
Leroy was just in the office. The bookers were the guys that were in charge.
Right.
And his wife, Dorothy, she was a great lady, but she was, the business went to the boys. The business belongs to the guys in the ring. The guys in the office put it all together, and it's just a big conglomerate of minds.
You said you were booking a little bit for Leroy. How long after were you wrestling for a couple years before you started booking? I mean.
Oh yeah, I wrestled. I started '67.
Right.
Wrestling. So when I went to Oklahoma, that was 1980.
Okay.
And I was well into my knowledge.
Right. Okay. Members teaming up with Ron McFarlane.
Ron McFarlane. He was a country boy out of Kansas, out of Wichita, Kansas, and he was good. He was funny. We got along real good. We had a good chemistry. We just had a good time in the ring. I was a serious worker. He was learning. He was a young kid, but he had a lot of heart, and we had a lot of fun in the ring.
You also got to work with Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Gilbert, I believe.
Oh yeah.
What are your memories of the Gilberts?
Gilberts, they were good talent. I mean, they came from the Memphis territory, and that goes back to Jared and the Goldens and the Welches, and they just had their own circle of talent, and they were all good. I wrestled all of them.
Did you ever work for Jared?
I went to Jared's territory when I was in Oklahoma, and we were going to trade off talent, and Jared came to Oklahoma to Tulsa, and we met and talked, and I was going to go up there and wrestle, and I went up there one night, and I looked at all those idiots, and that's what they were.
Huh.
And I call it the giant killer territory, because all you had to be was 5'6", and you were made. And I walked in and I stayed 20 minutes, got my car, drove down the road, got a hotel room, and told Dorothy, I said, it ain't gonna work.
Right.
And that was it. And I never went there.
When you worked with the Gilberts, did you see a lot of potential in Eddie? Did you know he had it?
He had, back then, he grew into it because he worked out of the Memphis territory. Memphis territory is a funny territory. Back then, like I said, they were all small guys, and they had their clique. And I just wasn't part of that clique down there because I didn't care the way they did things. But in the ring, everyone was treated the same.
They pretty much fed everybody to Lawler, and then
Yeah, Lawler and Dundee,
Yep.
the Giant Killers. I called them the Giant Killers. But it was good. I mean, it was a good experience. I've never had a bad experience in the ring with anybody.
Memories of working with Hector Guerrero.
Guerrero. I worked with all the Guerrero boys. Hector was funny because he came in Oklahoma, and we had a lot of matches, and I had to get used to the Mexican style because we work left, they work right, and once you learn how to go their way, you don't get hurt. But I had a lot of fun with Guerrero. He was always good.
You get to work with Eddie too a little bit, or?
Yes, I worked with all the boys. I grew up with them. I mean, they were all kids, just like the Von Erichs. I wrestled all the Von Erichs. I did the Funks. I did them all.
I'm going to ask you about them coming up, definitely.
Yeah.
Also, you worked in Japan. What are your memories of going over to Japan? Did you work for Inoki or Baba?
Baba,
Okay.
Giant Baba. That was a fabulous experience. I mean, Japan has rings that are as hard as concrete, and I learned the first night not to grab a headlock because everything out of a headlock I got suplexed. I got suplexed so many times I was goofy.
Huh.
And their wrestlers there, they learn before they can even walk. I think they learn how to wrestle. They're great athletes, and Baba treated me real well. I had a great time. I had Dick Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes. Buddy Rose was there with me. And we had a good crew, and we had a good time. We were on a working tour. Working tours were 5 weeks where you worked 4 and had 1 week off.
Wow.
And it was a great experience. I was 22 years old when I went there first time, and it was phenomenal. I mean, I loved it.
Was it hard to adjust to the lifestyle of Japanese culture?
Yeah, Buddy and I, we couldn't get into their food, so we found a McDonald's and a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and that's what we lived on. And if we got up early in the morning, you had to get up 5 to 8. You could get a good American breakfast, eggs and cereal and stuff like that, or otherwise, fish, and we went down to McDonald's.
Right. Did you like the, I guess in Japanese, the wrestling, it's a lot stiffer than the American style. Did you take a lot to get used to, or?
No, once you learn that they're very, very, very strict, and American boys would go over there and they would sit in the bleachers and watch them. They would run up and down the steps and do Hindu squats and work out, and they were dead serious. They had to do that every day for 2 hours before they wrestled. So when you got in the ring, you knew you were going to have a good match.
Right.
And you learned well. You learned solid and stiff is very good. A lot of guys don't like it, but I love it and I thrive on it.
Right.
That's what I do today, and that's what I did all my life. I really didn't care if I hit you as hard as I could. If you didn't like it, hit me back as hard because I love it. The harder you hit me, the harder I hit you. And I learned that from Johnny Valentine. Valentine was a great mentor to me. He taught me a lot of stuff in the ring. He taught me how to count to 10 and pray. He would raise that arm up in the air and you count to 10, and the minute you hit 10, that arm would come down and he'd knock your dick stiff. And he would knock me down on the floor, and I'd get up and he'd say, hit me. And I hit him, and he'd hit me harder. My hand would have welts on it for trying to hurt this guy. But every time I worked with him, and I loved it, count to 10 and pray. And he clocked. He taught me how to hit, and he taught me how to hurt people. Not hurt them, but be solid. And he was a guy that was a mat man. He didn't take bumps. He wrestled in the mat. And he was fabulous. He was a great teacher.
A lot of people say that about him, so.
Oh, he was. He was a great river too.
Any good ribs?
Oh, he he would piss in your bag. He would put shit in your bag, and Valentine put. There was a guy named Jay York, the Alaskan, and we were in Macon, Georgia one night, and Valentine took out the. He had the asthma, so he had a spray in his for breathing, and he put lighter fluid in it. And Alaskan went ballistic. He pulled out a shotgun, blew his bag all apart.
Wow.
And cops thought, who got shot? No problem, we're just playing a game in the dressing room. So they didn't do anything, but he never put fluid in there again either.
Wow.
But yeah, he was good for that.
Huh. Well, you talked about touring Japan with Dusty and Dick Murdoch. What are your memories of Captain Redneck?
Oh, Dusty and Dick, they came to Minneapolis in the early 70s, and I would drive them all around. They'd bring the car and leave it at my house, and then they would fly out. They were crazy. Those guys were crazy. In Minneapolis, the old Minneapolis Auditorium was 3 blocks from the nightclub area, and they brought a jackass into a bar one night, and it was unbelievable. I mean, the fights they had in the bar. The owner would call the police. The police said, "Who's fighting?" "It's Murdoch and Rhodes against Race and Henning."
Huh.
And they said, "Well, let us know when it's over." You couldn't buy the publicity that they got, and they would pay for the damages. Vern pay all the bills for the damage, but they were crazy. They did some crazy shit.
You also got to work in the Georgia territory. What are your memories working in Georgia?
I loved Georgia. I was down south almost all my life. And Georgia was just a great territory. We had so many talented guys down there. It was great because I could wrestle 12 times a week, and I would learn. I mean, it was a hectic schedule. On Saturday, you would wrestle 6 times on Saturday. Do 3 tapes at Channel 17 when it just started, and then you get in your car and drive to Columbus for Fred Ward, do 2-3 tapes there, get in your car and either go to Carrollton or Griffin or another spot down and do your show that night. So it really whooped you.
In Georgia, you teamed up with Bobby Shane. What are your memories of teaming up with Bobby?
Bobby was just a great guy. He had so much knowledge, and at his young age, and he was just phenomenal at everything he did. And you couldn't help but learn being with him or riding with him. But when you were in the ring, you just saw pure. It was just perfection. He loved to do everything right and have a good time doing it.
You also had some matches that were pretty standoutish with Alexis Smirnoff. What are your memories working with Alexis?
I did all the work. There was not a lot. I would rather just have him stand in the corner because I had to do all the work. He was very green. He really didn't know a lot. He was just learning. So I just took the bull by the horn and just did the best I could do.
Who was booking down there, Ole or George Scott, or
In
Georgia when you were there?
in Georgia, they had a few different guys in Georgia. It wasn't Ole and Gene. They had Race was in there. You had Dusty in there, and they had a couple other guys in there. I can't remember, but they had a good team. They had a lot of talented guys. Back then, all the minds would come together because wrestlers are the greatest mind thinkers in the world, in the business. That's how it was back then. And what we could come up with is from experience in the ring, and that's what we produced.
Memories of Ole Anderson.
I grew up in Minneapolis with Ole, and he is a prankster. He could talk your head off, and then he could tie you up and spit you out and make you have fun getting hurt. And Ole was always quick with the mouth and smart, and he could back it up because he could tie you up and hurt you so fast, and you would learn. I wrestled him and Gene 100 times, and they were great.
A lot of people say Ole's kind of bitter. Do you find that to be true?
I wouldn't say bitter. When you're in the business for 30, 35 years and you get sick and you stop working, you get bitter because you can't do what you used to do, and some people don't want to bring you back and use you. And when Gene died, Ole, bottom line was Ole and Gene together were great. and Ole was great in the early years as a single, but after Gene died, Ole just was a single, and it was hard for him.
All right. Memories of your matches with Buzz Sawyer.
I traveled with Buzz. I never wrestled Buzz. I think I had one match with him. Buzz was a lunatic.
That's what everybody says.
He was crazy. He was very dangerous, and he really didn't give a shit if he got hurt or not. And I was very fortunate. I didn't have to wrestle him but one time, I think, because I was a heel, and so I didn't have to work with him.
Can you give some examples of how he was crazy and a lunatic?
He was careless in the ring. He just do stupid things and try and hurt people that he thought he could get away with. He thought he was the greatest wrestler in the world, and he wasn't. And I always liked the guy. A lot of guys didn't like him because of the way he was. He was on roids and he was crazy. But steroids back then wasn't really rampant with the guys. And some could take him, some couldn't. He was one that took so much, it just made him crazy.
Right. Were you around him? A lot of people tell us about his cocaine days and stuff like that too. Were you
I wasn't around him then.
As far as his passing, what are you, I guess, aware of? Are you familiar with the circumstances that surround his death? Or
I know he got cut up in a fight.
Right.
And he made his match.
Right.
He just pushed it one night too far. And
right. Well, they say he OD'd on cocaine. Other people say that it was drug related, that he got in a fight with somebody and they could have made him take the cocaine, or
I don't know. There's
right.
different stories, and I never go through stories. If I don't know it, I don't say anything.
I hear it. Why do you think you weren't pushed hard in Georgia until later in your career?
Because I was my upbringing and the way I was taught how to wrestle, and the guys that taught me how to wrestle and do the things that I was supposed to learn how to do in Florida made me a wrestler that could wrestle anybody and make them look good, and I could still look good and still lose the match, and it didn't bother me because I knew what my talent was, and it never bothered me. What bothered me was I could go out there and I'll do the main event, and if you didn't watch, you have a bad night because you have to follow me.
All right. What are your memories about Jim Barnett?
Jim Barnett was a great guy. Now, he paid fair, he liked you, he took care of you. I was very fortunate because I wrestled very good, and Mr. Barnett would fly me to Florida to do TV, and he was just a great guy. Now, Jim Barnett was queer, but he never brought it into the business end. He treated all the guys with respect. And a lot of guys made fun of him, and he knew that, but it didn't bother him because we were all working for him.
Right.
And he was a hell of a pay man.
Right. What about Gordon Solie, one of the greatest announcers?
Gordon was great. I mean, there's no bottom line about Gordon. He knew everything about the business. He was in and out, and he loved to party. He could outdrink probably anybody, and he did every night.
Right.
He was a strong drinker, but when it came time to do his job and get on that microphone, he was there.
Memories of Thunderbolt Patterson, and a lot of people say that Dusty Rhodes kind of stole his gimmick. Do you agree with that, or?
I don't. Dusty was getting his own style. T-Boat in the early '70s and mid '70s and that, he was down in Georgia. T-Boat never came out of Georgia. Okay, he did Georgia and Florida. He never traveled the country. He was just a Southern star. So he was just made for Georgia. The bottom line.
Right. Did Dusty Rhodes that worked in Georgia territory, was any different from the Dusty that from Florida and also in Japan? Now, I guess at this time he had more power and he was way more over. Did he change? Did he get a big ego?
Dusty had a hell of an ego, and like I said before, I grew up with Dusty and Dick when they first started, and we were good friends, and we stayed friends for a while. But then I didn't see eye to eye with Dusty. We had differences, and I basically told him to go to hell, and I stopped working for him. I was working for Ole when Ole had his organization in Georgia, and Dusty came out of the Carolinas when Crockett decided to buy Ole out.
Right.
And we had a big meeting at the studio, and Dusty came in and he started pointing fingers. You can stay. You can stay. You can stay. He pointed at me. You can stay. And then he told me I had to wrestle somebody. I said, Dad, I ain't staying. I'm out of here. I don't even want you. And I walked out.
Who did he want you to work?
Magnum. And I didn't like him. He had an ego that was, he thought his shit didn't stink, and I didn't care for him.
Huh. Plus, he was in for the big push. I know.
Yeah, he was.
Right.
And it didn't bother me with people getting a big push. It really didn't. But when you think you're better than other guys, and you keep shoving it, eventually someone's going to shove back, and I just.
Did Dusty
I
try to
didn't
keep you in the company because you guys were friends, or did he?
No, he respected me. When I said no, no meant no.
Right.
I'm a man of my word. If I say I'll wrestle for you, I wrestle. If I say I'm going to be there, I'll be there. I told Dusty I don't want nothing to do with you, and I left.
Now, what year did you wrestle the Funks, Terry and Dory, down in Texas?
I was down in Texas in '84. No, not '84. I'm sorry, '74. Race brought me down there, and Terry was down there, and Dory was down there, and Terry was crazy,
Huh.
and he came up with this fabulous idea for me, and I said I don't buy it. I didn't like it. It was a queer gimmick, and it was cute, but it was hard for me to adapt. He brought me into a beauty salon in Amarillo, Texas, with redneck cowboys. Found the queerest looking beautician, and had my hair up in curls and pink curls and that. And they had a camera crew there, and then he gave me this 40-pound robe. He said, "Wear it," and it was heavy and it was hot, but I learned a great deal down there.
What any good road stories from Texas with the Funks, like travel
Oh
wise?
yeah. We went to one of Dory's or Terry's party at his house in Canyon. All the boys were there on a cookout, and we were taking target practice and throwing food and getting in fights, and and the police did not like him at all. He ran up and down Canyon doing 120 mile an hour, and they were always trying to catch him, and they just couldn't catch him.
Huh.
And he's a legend. He's a legend in Canyon, Texas. I mean, he has a ranch there, and he was just crazy. He is crazy,
Huh.
but he's a great guy.
He's awesome. You worked for Fritz too, Fritz von Erich, right?
I wrestled for Fritz in the early '70s, and he was good. Fritz was good. He was a good promoter. I started wrestling his boys, and then I started training Stan Hansen and Brody. He asked me to come into the office one day, and he said, "Would you help train a couple guys?" I said, "Sure, I don't have a problem." I thought he was going to have me train little guys, and these two monsters come in. I said, "Holy shit."
This is Stan and Frank?
Yeah,
Right.
that's Stan and Frank. And I said, "Hi, guys." And he said, "Well, you're going to teach us?" And I got in the ring with them, and for 6 weeks I beat the dog shit out of them. And they never took a bad thing to me at all. They learned, they listened. And Brody was just funny because I would have him hit the turnbuckle back and forth 50 times. And then I'd get up there and I'd just chop the hell out of him. And then I'd get a wooden horse and I put it in the ring because I wasn't going to be in the middle of the ring and let him try and jump over my ass. And I would say, "Jump over this horse and land on your back." And it was awesome. I mean, he was funny. And we got along great. He never forgot that. He would always, every time we met, he said, "I remember Dallas beat me up." He said, "I love you for it." And
Wow.
we were always great friends. And
Did you know he was going to be a huge star one day?
Oh yeah, I just knew where he was going with his size, and how Von Erich was molding him, and he stayed down south and then moved his way around. He was going to be good. He was good.
What about Stan? Did you see them as equals, or did you see
No.
one have more potential than the other?
Brody had the potential.
Right.
Brody had a natural potential. He had a natural gimmick. He was burly. He was wild. He was thick, and he just brought that magnetism in the ring with him. And Stan didn't have it at the time, and Stan had to be molded even harder to get him in because Stan had a different way of approaching it, and Brody was just a beast. That's how he got over.
What are your feelings on the tragedy that happened in Puerto Rico in July of '88, I believe?
I saw Brody a week before he went there, and we were wrestling in a town in Georgia, and they came back and said, "Did you hear Brody got killed?" And I freaked because Abdullah was there when it happened, and Abdullah was on the show with me and told me, and I felt really bad. I mean, Brody was the type of guy that would stand up for the little guy and fight for you, and he fought for his money. He fought for the guy's rights, and he just, pissed him. He just pissed off Carlos Colon over there, and they killed him.
Right.
And it was sad, but you go to a foreign country to wrestle. You're in their ballpark. You play by their rules. Wrestlers would get shot over there and stabbed over there, because if you gave them trouble, hey, you're in another country. You're out in the woods. You're gone.
Right. There's a lot of different stories surrounding that. It stemmed from heat between Brody and Vader from when they worked for Vince Sr. I guess there was problems in the locker room where I guess he thought Brody took advantage of him when he was a job guy for Vince Sr. And then when they went over there, Brody had an ego and.
Brody really never had an ego. Brody was just Brody. He had one way to go. He wrestled and he treated everyone the same way, but he didn't take no shit from anybody.
Right.
If you had a problem with him, deal in the ring with him, and it would be one-on-one, and he didn't have a problem with it.
As far as Fritz goes and the Von Erichs, which son did you see had the most potential? A lot of the guys say David was pretty much the best worker out of the bunch.
David got the biggest push.
Right.
And he was good. He just had a lot of personal problems, and his potential was unbelievable, because everyone, first of all, you got the families. You got certain families around the country. The Von Erichs had a lot of pull in Kansas and Georgia and Florida because of the family relationship. He got a good push, but he worked at it. He worked hard. He liked to have fun. It was another tragedy, and they had a lot of them in that family.
Did you see a lot of the drug use with the Von Erichs when you were in the territory, or?
No, not a lot, because I didn't travel with them. I was a heel, they were bay faces, and that's how I kept it. I stayed to my group, and I never associated with them. I only in the ring.
Who did you get to work with down in Florida, in Texas?
I wrestled everyone that was down there at that time. It's been so long. It's been over 35 years, but I worked with everyone that came in that territory. I wish I could remember some names, but it's been a long time.
Any standout stories, I guess, from the Texas era?
Yeah, Bob Orton and I traveled a lot together, and we would leave Dallas to head up to San Antonio, and Bobby was just learning how to play golf, and I was learning too. And on the way to San Antonio, we pulled the car off on the road and shoot golf balls across the highway over Greyhound buses and cars, and we didn't give a shit. And we were drinking a case of beer on the way to San Antonio because it was hot. Everyone drank. You pick a case of beer, go to town drunk. But that's how the guys traveled down there.
Right. Back in Georgia, Andre the Giant, memories of Andre?
I have a lot of good memories of Andre. I wrestled him in a double ring match where you had to be, the only way you could win is be thrown from one ring into the other ring over the rope and not get thrown over the top. Well, Andre just went from here, I went over there, and then the next thing I knew I was over there, and he was just huge. Andre was a great guy to wrestle. He would never hurt you. He was such a gentle man. If you got hurt, you hurt yourself.
Right.
And if you hurt yourself, you're stupid. And my hand goes up because I was stupid. I hurt myself one time with him. He went to give me an ass bump, and I just drove my legs as hard as I could into the mat, and I blew my knee right out. And he said, "I'm sorry, boss." I said, "You didn't do it, I did it." And he was very sorry about it, but he never hurt anybody. You wouldn't want him to get mad because he was so gentle, but if you pissed him off, the big man would hurt you.
That's what everybody says. If he liked you, he liked you, but if he didn't, you'd know it.
You would know it, because he'd drink 3-4 cases in one night.
Right.
And not even get started. 3 cases would just start getting him going. I saw that man drink 4-5 cases one night and didn't even have a buzz on him. And I said, "Oh, not me."
Oh, wow. Mr. Wrestling 2, memories of Mr. Wrestling 2.
Johnny Walker was a great wrestler. I mean, he was good. He was another serious guy in the ring. He had an attitude, but his attitude was only because he wanted to have everything done right, and he was another one that wanted to have perfection right then and there. He didn't want any mistakes, anything. You had to be able to read his mind, and in the ring, body position and looking at the eyes was our contact and how we wanted to wrestle. And you had to learn how to read the mind and the eyes. And if your body was this way, you knew you were going to go this way, and you saw the eyes, you knew what you had to do. And that was good teaching. Those guys were good teachers. I mean, these kids today would never be able to make it in their business, because those guys would eat them up alive.
Okay.
I mean, back then in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, these kids would get killed. They won't even have a clue.
Well, it's all high spots now, and nobody has psychology anymore either. So
They don't have a clue.
yeah, exactly.
You know,
It's a different business.
it's sad.
Memories of Wildfire, Tommy Rich.
Tommy Rich. Tommy was good. Tommy was a young kid. He got a hell of a break. Jim Barnett loved the hell out of him, and you just had to go with the flow with Tommy. Tommy was a good wrestler, but he just had that ego because he knew he had the backing of Barnett,
Right.
and it was hard to get around that.
A lot of people say that they put the belt on him because of Barnett liking him. Do you think that's the case, or?
Oh yeah, that was the case.
Wow.
They gave it to him for 1 week. It was sad, but I mean, you don't argue with the book. You don't argue with men that pays you.
Right.
You know, I mean, he did it. He did it for 1 week. They made it work. They had a meeting. Back then, the NWA had alliance. One person didn't call a shot. You had 15 territories that were NWA, and they had to vote.
Right.
And the vote went for 1 week, and that was it. And then they dropped it right back.
Right. Now, when you were down in Florida, skipping ahead, any good road stories from the Florida territory?
Oh yeah, Florida was fun. You had a lot of. Florida was another territory that was hard because of the miles. I mean, you had Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami, West Palm, and Lauderdale, and Tallahassee. And I had a gentleman, John Fuller, was that Englishman that was always beating the shit out of me in the pit, and he would ride with me, and he would have to go to the bathroom, and I'd wait till he drank about 12 beers, and I'd pull over on the side of the road, and he'd go take a leak, and I'd get out, and the other guys would get out, and we'd get back in. I'd lock the door and take off, and he'd be strutting down the road, pot belly and all, and I'll get you tomorrow.
Huh.
And every time I did it, I knew I'd get it tomorrow, because the next day that sweat and that beer would come out of him, and he'd just chew me up. You thought you're funny leaving me on the road, huh? I did that a lot of times to him.
Any good stories at Alligator Alley? Have you guys ever?
Oh, yeah, Alligator Alley. Terry Funk was down there, and we had a lot of fun. Terry would pull the car over and see a gator 7 feet long and try to chase it and get it. And I said, "You're crazy." But Terry was crazy.
Right.
But he would do this all the time. And then one time I was driving down the road, and I had a couple guys in the car. Foley was in the car with me, and Roger Kirby, and I ran over about a 12-foot gator, and I thought it just tore my car to hell. And then my car just bounced. And I said, "Man, I can't take this shit." Take the freeway. That Alligator Alley was just a shortcut, and it was always dangerous because gators just walk
Yep.
all over the place.
Yeah.
And they don't care what you drive.
Memories of working in Oklahoma for Bill Watts, and a lot of people say Bill Watts was a bully. What is your opinion on Bill Watts?
I'll tell you what, Bill Watts come to Minneapolis when he first started and got his push there, and Bill and I got along so good. We had a great friendship, and I respected him, he respected me. He called me up, I called him, he returned my call, and he said, "You come down, and I'll put you on the lower end." And the lower end consists of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, New Orleans, Lafayette, LaGrange, Monroe, and Shreveport. And that was 3,000 miles. And the upper end was 5,000 miles. And he kept his word. Yeah, I never went to the upper end, and he paid me well. I never had a problem with Bill. He treated me with respect. I gave him everything I had, and we had a good relationship. So I don't have any bad words about Bill Watts. A lot of guys didn't like him.
Right.
They call him all kinds of names. But he never did me wrong.
Who were some of the guys you worked with in Mid-South?
Well, we had down there. These are old time. A lot of old timers were down there.
Pork Chop Cash?
Bob Alice was down there. Cowboy Bob Alice.
Right.
I went to Shreveport to do a TV one time, and he had a toupee on, and I forgot about it. And he said, "You know, I wear a toupee." I said, "Yeah, I know." So the first thing I did, I shot him in the rope, and I grabbed his, and I said, "Oh shit!" I said, "Come back here, get your hair." I pulled it right off, and I just felt that small. Bill Watts was going crazy in the back. The guys were laughing their ass off. I thought I was going to get killed, but that was funny. That's the last time I grabbed his wig.
Memories of Pork Chop Cash.
Oh, Pork Chop. We had a lot of matches. Pork Chop. I had some good matches with him where back then you could do a lot of stuff that really got over easy. One was I worked with him a few times, and I got a big watermelon and cut out the middle and put a brick in there. And then I put the top back on there, and I hit him over the head with that watermelon, and it'd break, and I break that people would go crazy, and he would just go ballistic. And he was a good guy, hard worker, just another guy that was wanted to work, and he got a lot of work.
You also worked for Bob Geigel in Central States. What are your memories of working for Bob?
Bob was good. He was a hard guy to work for. Not hard. He just wanted everything done right. And when I went down there for Geigel, I was reffing mostly and putting the ring up. And I remember one time Harley Race was the champion, and he was working with Dory Funk, and I was the referee, and we were at the Memorial Hall, and I counted him out. Oh, I thought I was going to die. I said, "Holy shit, how do I get out of this?" And those two guys wanted to kill me, but we got out of the mix, and the match went on. And when I got back to the dressing room, I thought Harley was going to kill me. And Bob Geigel's bald head was just as red as could be, and I thought he was just going to blow my head off. And they just said, "You got to take time and figure out what you're doing."
All right.
And I said, "I learned from that mistake too."
Huh. There you go. Were the payoffs as bad as they say?
Back then, in the 60s and 70s, the payoffs were $45, $50, $60, $75 for underneath guys, and you had to drive 1,000 miles sometimes for that money. But you would make it up because the big shows on the weekend, you would make $300-400, so it really balanced out pretty good. Because I was making $1,500 a week. And I was on the B squad, and we did a lot of traveling. One night we'd be in Charleston, South Carolina. Next night we'd be in Norfolk, Virginia. And but the balance would go off. But today, these kids, if they had to go wrestle for $40, they'd tell you go to hell.
Yeah.
But back then, that's all the territories paid that way. I mean, no one paid big money. Main Event got the big money, but they paid by ability and how good you were. And I was taken care of. I worked hard. I learned my trade very well.
Memories of Ric Flair.
Well, Rick was training in Minneapolis with Gagne when I was hauling the ring in wrestling. And Rick was good. I mean, Rick walked into a gold mine. They liked him. He had a decent body. And Crockett took care of him. And Rick earned everything he got. I mean, he worked hard. And he had a lot of talent. He had Valentine teaching him. He had Wahoo teaching him. And he had Weaver teaching him. And you had guys back there that could teach you. And those guys are not around anymore. And Rick learned the hard way. I mean, he wrestled hard and had great matches. And he came up. I mean, he got a break and never looked back, and God bless him.
What about Iron Sheik? Did you know Sheik?
Khosrow Vasari. He came into Minneapolis right after the Olympics, and he wanted to learn how to wrestle. And Vern had his training camp up there. And it was one of the last training camps that he had. And Khosrow had a real bad attitude. And Billy Robinson, a great English wrestler, one of the best shooters in the world, and they would go at it, and he'd teach him. Kaz pinned him one time at the training camp, and that really pissed him off.
Wow.
And after that, he dropped a knee on Kaz's upper thigh and gave him a bruise about that big. He couldn't walk for about 4 days. but Cause was good. I mean, he had that Olympic mentality, and it took him a long time to adapt.
Right.
He was dangerous. He was very dangerous to wrestle. He was hurting people, breaking arms, legs, and he went to Carolina. Carolina was his last territory. He said, if you get thrown out there, you're done. And I had to wrestle one night, and I walked over and I told him, I said, walk us. And he had Weaver teaching him, and you had guys back there that could teach you, and those guys are not around anymore. And Rick learned the hard way. I mean, he wrestled hard and had great matches, and he came up. I mean, he got a break and never looked back, and God bless him.
What about Iron Sheik? Did you know Sheik?
Kaz Rovasari, he came into Minneapolis right after the Olympics, and he wanted to learn how to wrestle. And Vern had his training camp up there, and it was one of the last training camps that he had. And Cosro had a real bad attitude, and Billy Robinson, a great English wrestler, one of the best shooters in the world, and they would go at it, and he'd teach him. Kaz pinned him one time at the training camp, and that really pissed him off.
Wow.
And after that, he dropped a knee on Kaz's upper thigh and gave him a bruise about that big. He could walk for about 4 days. But
We're talking about your chemistry you had with Buddy Rose and how Vern was kind of, I guess, jealous. Would you say, or?
he was jealous, and he just couldn't believe that the two kids that worked for them when they were young boys
Right.
were at the pinnacle in their lifetime. When you got to understand, so in our business back then, you didn't get a break until you were in your 30s, because you had to have at least 15 years of apprenticeship, and that was old school. That was the rule, and they went by that. And it just happened that I was 35, and Buddy was in his age, and we clicked, and the chemistry was just there, and we just drove Vern crazy. What we could do, and the houses we just were selling out everywhere, and it ate at him a lot because I drove him crazy.
What are your thoughts on Vern as the boss?
Asshole.
Everybody says that. Why is that?
Oh, he's just an asshole. Vern, the AWA was the territory in the whole United States that every wrestler wanted to go to. It was the greatest territory ever, and at one time you could go in there and make unbelievable money, and everybody fought to go to Minneapolis. But Minneapolis was a territory of about 18 guys, and everyone fought there because of the money, and they got paid so well. But in Vern's later years, he just became he was an asshole.
Right.
He started stealing so much money. He was getting like 94 cents out of every dollar he was trying to steal, and it was just getting so bad. And we had so many fights about the money, and he didn't like me because I was outspoken. I was a locker room lawyer. I was like Brody. I would stick up for the guys and give them. If we had a beef, the guys were scared to, speak their opinion. So I went in there and I just laid it out. He didn't like it.
Huh.
He respected it, but he didn't like me. But I really didn't give a shit because I was right, and all the boys were right. But he was the man, and he was losing it. He was going crazy. I called him. I said, "You're just plain crazy." I said, "You're schizo," and he didn't like that either. But I spoke my mind. What I said was the truth, and he lost it. He completely lost it, and he stole so much money. He just stole everything he could get.
From the boys, you're saying, obviously, from payoffs and stuff.
Oh yeah,
Right.
I mean, the money was there, but we weren't getting it. He was just stealing it. The pay-per-view we did,
Wrestle Rock?
yeah, Wrestle Rock, and then the brawl in St. Paul, the cage match.
Right.
No one got a nickel out of the pay-per-views at all. And we bitched about it. He said, it'd be 90 days, 120 days. I said, it's been 6 months, asshole. And we never got a dime. And he admitted it. He never paid anybody for the pay shows.
Wow.
He came straight out and he kept all the money. A lot of guys just, we had Jimmy Snuka, we had De Beers, we had the Sheik down there, we had a couple of Japanese wrestlers, we had Smirnoff, we had a whole talented crew. and we were all getting screwed, and we were getting tired of it. I mean,
Did anybody almost quit over that?
oh yeah, I did. I gave. We had to go to Hawaii, and we all went to Hawaii, and my wife went to the office to get my paycheck to pay some bills. He had 13 of our paychecks, and he wouldn't release any of the money. And so I told my wife, I said, well, hand him the letter I wrote. And I gave him a letter of resignation. I told him where to stick it. And he called Hawaii, and Ray Stevens was there, and he was going, what the hell are you doing? You can't have your wife go down to the office and resign? I said, Ray, he's got 13 paychecks of everybody here keeping it in escrow. I said, he told my wife we couldn't have a paycheck to pay our bills. I said, you don't do that to me. I said, he can go to hell. And I did. I went back to the office, and when we came back from Hawaii, and I got our money. The boys got paid. And I went in the office and said, you're about ready to lose everybody because we got to have our money. And I said, don't you ever tell my wife I can't have a check when it's there.
All right.
And I stood up and I spoke a lot of things that I thought was wrong, and I stood up for him. And he didn't like it.
Now, the AWA was really hot at one time, especially when you came in. Why do you think it never took off to be like a national company?
It had all the potential.
Because you had TV on ESPN and all that.
The bottom line is Vern was stealing so much money. And when you steal that much money, the talented talent that is putting those 20,000 people in the arena every night that Buddy and I and the kids were doing, we got tired of it. Greg could draw $10,000 at the casino to gamble with, and we couldn't draw 500 because they'd be bitch about it.
Right.
And it just got to a point that Vern killed himself, and he killed the AWA. When we left, Snuka left, the Beers left, Buddy and I left. Z stayed around because he was dating Kathy Gagne, and God bless him. And they tried to bring in a bunch of other teams to make them these young teams, and they couldn't do it. They could not stand up to what Sean and Marty did with us, and no one could follow what we did, so it was hard.
I'm definitely going to talk about some of your matches with those guys coming up. What are your thoughts on Greg Gagne?
I never had a problem with Greg. Greg is a Gagne. I mean, that's the difference. But Greg earned everything that he got in the ring. I mean, he got the shit kicked out of him as he was learning the business, as all sons do, because they don't get no special treatment. But Greg was a Gagne, and that's the bottom line there. It just, you separate the two, and it was always that way.
I guess, did you think that Greg's push was irrelevant, or you think he was a good worker, or do you think that...
Oh, no, Greg was a talented worker, but, I mean, it was push. I mean, it was Gagne.
Right.
And it was Gagne's legacy. So it was only going to go one way, and the only way it went was straight up. And they shoved it, and he had great people to work with, and he earned a lot of respect.
Some people say that Vern never actually watched his own product. Do you think that's true?
No, Vern watched, but he at that time he was losing it. He was really, he didn't have a grip on reality. And he forgot who made him and what made him, and it's not just one or two guys, it's all the guys. Everyone puts the picture together, and he was just breaking the picture apart. And he forgot. He forgot because he took over from his partner, and when he took over from his partner, he could do no wrong, and he just saw dollar signs and more dollar signs and more dollar signs, and give the guys a couple dollars here, and then they'd be happy with it. Well, we weren't happy with it.
Memories of working around with Larry Zbyszko.
Oh, Larry and I, we had a lot of fun together. He was my roommate and my driving partner. We would drive when we were having a drive. I would drive one week, and if we were on the road the next week, when we came back, he would drive, and we shared rooms, and we played chess 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning every day. That's all we did, play chess and travel.
Memories of working with Sherry Martel, managing you and all.
Sherry was great. I loved Sherry. I met Sherry in early '60s. I mean, late '60s in New Orleans. When she was a stripper, and it was funny because when I went to Minneapolis, Sherry, I didn't even remember her. We were on a plane to Las Vegas, and I was flirting with her. I was trying to pick her up, and everyone was laughing, except for me because I didn't know the rib. The rib was it's Sherry, and I couldn't place it. Then she said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "I don't have a clue who you are. I just want to go out with you." She said, "I'm Sherry from Louisiana." I said, "Oh shit." So it was a great time, and Z and her, they got me one night in Vegas. I was in the room, and I was in there with a lady, and I don't know how Sherry talked them into it, but they popped the door with the key, and Sherry had a bucket of water, ice cold water, and threw it on me, and I was pissed. And I jumped out of that bed, and I mean, I was hot. And I went and slammed that door, kicked them out of there, and I'll be goddamn 10 minutes later, she did it again. And I said, payback is going to come. So for about 2 months, she said, please just get it over with. I was so sweet to her, nice, didn't do anything. I waited until we got to Salt Lake City one day. It was 110 out. She was sitting at the pool with Candy Devine and Kurt and Scott and Buddy and everyone was out there, and I opened up a window on the 5th floor, and I had a bucket, garbage can, and I filled it up with ice, and I let it melt, and I filled up more. And I got up there, and I looked, and people from the hotel were staying out there, and I dumped that bucket out, and when that hit her, she'd come out of her top. I said, gotcha.
Ha.
And it was good. We had a lot of fun. Sherry was a fabulous lady and a hard worker, and I love her to death.
Was there ever any romance between you and her?
Sherry and I were together a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah, Sherry and I, she was my roommate for a long time.
There you go.
But I was telling the guys earlier, I said she was my roommate, and we were in Denver one night, and my wife didn't know about this. I mean, the lady I was going to have my wife, we did. But she called the hotel, and Sherry answered. I was in the shower, and Sherry answered the phone, and my old lady went ballistic. I said, who was that? That was your wife. I said, oh, shit. I said, now we got to get out of this. He said, we'll get out of it. So we went back to Minneapolis 2 days later, and she said, I got it under control. I'll call your wife. We'll take her out to dinner. Went to the best steakhouse in Minneapolis. By the time dinner was over with, totally forgotten. Everything was great. I mean, and then the next day, Sherry and I got in the car and took off to Milwaukee. So she was a great lady.
Memories of a young Scott Hall.
Scott Hall, whew, let me tell you, when Buddy and I would wrestle with Scott and Kurt, Buddy would never get in the ring first. That was my job, because Scott, he was hard, he was dangerous. His first punch, the first punch, he knocked my dick stiff, and then he would say, "I'm sorry." I was like, "Fuck." Then Buddy would get in because first punch is over with. He's okay, but every night I got the first punch. So I used to tell Scott and Trent, I said, why don't you apologize now so when you hit me, you don't have to apologize. It became a good joke, but Scott was hard, but he learned. He was a good listener, he learned.
Are you, I guess, saddened in a way to see what he's ended up to be, in a way?
Well, you know, the business is hard on a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends it's been hard on. It's been hard on me. I did a lot of things that I wish I'd never done. It cost me a lot of money and destroyed a lot of things I was working for. But it was a learning experience.
Right.
And everyone goes through it, some worse than others.
What are your memories of a young Curt Hennig?
I grew up with his daddy, and Kurt was a young boy, and he was a talented athlete, gifted. He was so smooth and so talented. And his potential, you knew where he was going. But he was just such a great guy in the ring, a great guy outside, and he loved the rib. I mean, you could play ribs on him, and he'd come back and get you even better. I mean, we got him all the time on the plane when we would go from Minneapolis to San Francisco or to Vegas. He would wear his sandals and shorts. He'd be sleeping. When he goes out, he's out. And the plane was full one trip. And we got Sherry's brightest red toenail polish, and we painted all his toenails bright red. and we're telling the people, shh, don't holler, don't laugh. And when we landed in Vegas, we got off that plane so fast, and he was waking up, and people were just laughing. He said, "What are you guys laughing about?" And he looked down and said, "They got me." And we would get him, and he'd get us back.
Huh.
He was good.
Put locks on your bags and stuff.
Oh, the locks on the bags were that was great. I mean, we used to put locks on the rockers' bags on the dresser in a hotel room and padlock them, and they would have to take the damn drawers out and go through the lobby, and they would have to break these drawers off, and the handle would still be on them on some of them, and they go through the airport with the lock on there, and we used to do some shit.
What are some of your early memories of some of your matches with Sean and Marty as the Rockers?
We got hold of two kids that had so much potential, and they had they just wanted to learn, and they weren't afraid to learn. They were scared, but they weren't. They just didn't know how bad I was going to be, if I was going to have a good day or bad day. If I had a bad night, they were going to have a bad day. And but they were quick. They learned. They were good. They were so afraid of not being able to live up to the potential that we were working at, and we worked full speed. And back then, full speed. I mean, Buddy would go from 240 to 400 pounds and never slow down. And the kids just learned so fast, and they were so good. They were there, and when the spot was messed up, we would cover it up, and they just couldn't figure out how fast we could cover it up and correct it and make it the right move. And they thanked us, and they learned so much.
Did you guys know that you had something there with those guys?
Oh yeah, it's like when Buddy and I got together, the chemistry with Buddy and I was just natural. When those two kids got together, it was natural, and it was being formed even better. When every match set them a higher pedestal, and they never came down. I mean, they were great.
What do you think made those matches so good?
What made those matches so good was the fact that we demanded the perfection. I demanded perfection. Buddy was the talker and the mover. I was the enforcer, and I'd be the hard hitter and the wrestler, and it just clicked. I never outdid Buddy. Buddy was great at his stuff, and I was great at my stuff, and we never tried to take anything away from him, or he never tried to take anything from me. And the kids learned that also. They both had things they both did well, and they never took away from each other. They learned that you have to work as a unit, as one, but you're two separate people.
Right.
And they picked up on it. They learned, and the 2 years that we wrestled them, they got a great education, and we had great fun.
Sean, we did an interview with Sean, and he talked about being immature and crazy back then. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, Sean and Marty were just crazy. They wild young kids. I mean, anything and everything was legal to them. They used to pull fire alarms at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And Z and I would be up on the 8th floor at night at the hotel and said, "What time is it?" At 5 o'clock, kids are playing around again. And they got us thrown out of more hotels for the fire alarm shit. And it was great, because when they did that, the next night I said, "I had a bad day. I had a bad night. You're going to have a bad night."
Right.
And I'd get in the ring, and I played with them. I got them one night. I had icy hot, and I went down the ring with a towel on my hand, and I said, "Watch this, 30 minutes on TV." I said, "I'm going to burn his nuts." And I grabbed them, and you couldn't go nowhere. And but they were great. They had fun, but it was fun. I mean, we were on the road 28 days a month, and we had to break the pattern of boredom, because the traveling was the hardest thing, and wrestling was a night off. I mean, it was relaxing in the ring. The traveling was killing us, because we were gone 20 days a month, 320 days a year was our schedule, and we were just kicking some miles. And if you didn't get crazy, you go crazy. So, you know,
Right.
the parties and the broads and the booze and the drugs back then, that's how people made it.
I was going to ask you, how big was the party scene back then?
Every night.
Right.
Every night. It was just part of the business. I mean, we played hard, and we partied hard. We would party 4 or 5 in the morning, and the kids would they were so young, they never got tired. They'd drive us crazy. Go to bed. No, we're not going to go to bed. It just Z and I would just go crazy with the stuff they would do. But they were great. I mean, back then, everyone rigged everybody. Everyone was fair game.
Right. Your ESPN bloodbath against the Rockers, it's still talked about to this day. In fact, WWF put it out on their DVD. Why do you think that match is still remembered today as a classic, and what are your memories of that match?
That one of the blood matches, the cage match. We had a lot of different blood matches, but the cage match was the greatest cage match. I'm sorry, I'm not being obnoxious or conceited. The bottom line is, when we got in that cage match, it was a collaboration of 1 year before we did that. We made people want to see it. And the difference now between then and today, we bled like stuffed pigs. And today, you work in a 6-sided cage or 3 cages inside a cage, and they don't get a drink of blood. They don't know what the concept is. If you're working in a cage, you got to get hurt in a cage. And when we wrestled in a cage, when they went down between the ropes, the skin would be peeled off their back. I went home one night from a cage match in St. Paul, the Brawl in St. Paul, and my wife took pictures of my back. I had skin just peeled off my body from going between the ropes and the cage, and my head was raked with the cage, and we rake, and that was old school, educated to the young kids, and they learned that when you do something that has an object that means something, you have to use it, and that part has been lost. I mean, Vince has all these cage matches and all these matches, and they're not used right. That's why that match in '85 and '86 was the greatest cage match ever, and that's why it's been out so long, and people talk about it, and they say it is the greatest, and I know it was, because we had 2 talented kids, and I had a very talented partner that believed in the same thing I did.
Well, there's also another bloodbath. I think it was when they aired on New Year's Eve that everyone still talks about to this day.
We had a lot of different blood matches. We had one in Vegas.
That's when Sean bled like a pig. That's the one.
That was the first. That was the beginning of
Right.
where we started the heavy stuff, and that was great. I mean, we tore the house down, and we beat the dog shit out of them, and they bled like stuffed pigs, and we were bleeding, they were bleeding, and it was done the right way, and it wasn't done by someone telling us how to do things. It was done because we knew what to do, when to do it, how to do it at the right time, and they were there. They were so afraid they wouldn't be there, but they caught on so fast that they were great, and we had fun. We had all the matches were a night off with the kids. I mean, it was fun. Yeah, a lot of times I had an attitude because of the ribs, but my attitude never hurt the match ever. We just had great matches.
What was it like to work Vegas? Because you guys had a good atmosphere there, I guess.
Well, we were the first. We were the first ones to sell the Showboat out, and keep selling it out. Every show we sold it out. They wanted to see what we were going to do to the kids or what they were going to do to us, and that is the whole picture. They want to see someone do something to somebody.
So,
And is it going to happen, and how much is it going to take place? And we did that, and that goes back to psychology and philosophy. And Buddy and I we knew what we had to do, and the kids just followed. And they, if they didn't understand, they just followed.
did a lot of the guys spend their paychecks in Vegas?
I know I did.
Right.
I know I got to dance every time I went to Vegas, because I was a horrible blackjack player. Zabisco would be on one side and Kurt be on the other side, and he said, don't draw, don't take a hit. And I'd take a hit and screw everybody up. And Z would just, you don't know how to play. He said, why don't you go somewhere else? And he would always get mad because I would always take that count, and then I'd take the card, and it would be his card, and he'd get mad because he would lose. And I always lost in Vegas.
All right.
But I had fun in Vegas.
What are your thoughts on Sean's success now?
His success has nothing to do but pure talent. He was talented when he was with us. He learned. He couldn't got 2 better teachers to teach him the basic and how to go into it. And Sean just took it to the next level, and he excelled. And I'm so proud of what he's done.
Buddy Rose did an interview one time and said that he and Colonel De Beers had better matches with the Rockers than you and he did. What are your thoughts on that comment?
I don't know. I talked to Buddy a lot of times. Buddy's never said that, but Buddy can say that. I mean, De Beers is a different type of worker,
Right.
but Buddy and I always wrestled the Rockers, so it was very seldom that I never wrestled them.
Right. What are your thoughts on our Colonel De Beers?
I know Ed Wiskowski from the early '70s when we both were down in Charlotte. We both started in Charlotte, basically, really working 7 days a week, and Ed was always a nice guy.
Right. Were you surprised that Sean and Marty came back to work for Vern again?
I was, but I knew it wasn't going to last very long because he was doing the same stuff. They were just passing time until they were going to make their move,
Right.
and it didn't take long for them to do that.
Also, one of the questions I was going to ask you was about the DVD and WWF when they showed your match. Did that give you more notoriety? Did people recognize you from that DVD at all?
I tell you the truth, the DVD came out. It did. I had, but I've always had people say that was the greatest match they've ever seen on tape, and the DVD just expressed it more. And it's seen all the time. It's probably seen more than any other DVD match out there, and it's talked about more than any. And I just have to say that it's talked about because it was great.
Did Vince ever try to contact you and Playboy about doing any work up there?
I went up there for Vince on 3 different times, and I'm old school, and I have to do it when it's in my head. I can't do it on a paper. And I told Pat Patterson, a great friend of mine, and I traveled with him for years, along with Tony Gurria and a bunch of other guys in the back. I said, I'm just old school. I said, I can't do that. And I went up there 3 different times, and I just didn't adapt to it. And I just said, nah, if I can't go out there and be myself and do what I feel is right, it ain't going to work. And, so I just moved on.
Do you remember the Nasty Boys watching your matches when they did Ring Crew when you were young?
Yeah. Nasty Boys stayed at my house a couple of times, and they just loved wrestling. They were just so hungry for it, and they would do anything to get in it. And they worked hard for it. They worked hard, did a lot of stuff to get where they were.
What are your thoughts on them as people, Brian and Jerry?
Oh, they're crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are off the wall. They're nice guys, but hey, we got some nuts in this business.
That's true.
I mean, if you put them all in one basket, you better have a big basket because there ain't nothing we wouldn't do or haven't done, and they're part of it. I mean, they're crazy.
Memories of Nick Bockwinkel.
Nick is a dear friend of mine, and I have the utmost respect for him, and he has the utmost respect for me, and I think the world of Nick. I used to come home again at Christmas time and let Vern know I was coming in, and I would work with Nick all the time. He said, I want Doug. And Nick would, we go in the ring, and he says, whatever you want. And I said, what are you doing? He says, Power Driver. I said, I got it. And I went out, that's all I need to know. And I went out there and I set it all up, and it was perfect. I would do a suplex on him and then go up on the top rope and do my head dive off the top rope like Benoit did and Race did, and then follow right into the Power Driver. And he gave us the greatest compliment ever when he had the belt, and the Rockers and we were in Denver, and he told the promoter, he says, I ain't gonna be main event. He said the tag has to be main event because he said there's no one that can follow those 4. And he was such a gentleman about it. He said it in front of everybody.
Wow.
It wasn't just dressed to Buddy or me to boost our ego or anything. It came straight from the heart because he knew that no one could follow the tag.
Right.
And from that day forth, he never followed the tag. He was always before the tag. And the Rockers didn't know what kind of compliment that was. But Buddy and I knew it because this guy is a great wrestler and a technician and an old-timer, and I've known him for 30 years plus, and that was the greatest compliment in the world. I mean, I thought it was great for Nick to say that, but he said, I'm not saying to boost your ego, but no one can touch you and Buddy and those kids. So don't worry about it.
Right.
The belt don't mean nothing.
Huh.
So
Now you disappeared for a little while after you lost the titles. Where did you go?
I went back to Georgia
Right.
and stayed there with my wife and my kids. And then I was wrestling down in Georgia and wrestling around the South. And I was getting ready to go back and work for Vince. I went to a show at the auditorium at the Phillips Arena, and I was going to go. I met him in November, and I was going to meet with him after Christmas. And then a few weeks after that, my daughter got killed, and I just put my boots up and I said I quit, and I went into seclusion for 7 years. So I just didn't care.
When you did come back, you teamed up with I guess Sold Out Houston off for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I came back a couple times when they asked me to he needed a partner. They needed to go to Memphis and let the Giant Killers get the belt. So I agreed to it, but there was nothing. It was just a couple matches.
Right.
He couldn't do anything. He was hard, so I did it all, and I didn't mind doing what had to be done. I'm that type of guy. It has to be done. Do it the right way. Get in, get out, and make it work.
Right. What are your memories of the Wrestle Rocks? The big shows?
They were great. I mean, we had a lot of fun. The Wrestle Rocks. Our best one was in Denver. We had Molly Hatchet, and I used to drive down the road to their music. You ripped off on Smoke and that, and they watched us do the show, and then they did a concert. And after the concert, we went back to the hotel, and they jammed in the bar, and we closed the bar off, and they jammed and we partied. And then we went up to their room. Their stories were no different than ours, except they were musicians and we were wrestlers, and we were all crazy. I mean, they gave us their shirts and they autographed them. I got my Molly Hatchet shirt at home, and we gave them pictures, and we took pictures, and we just had a fabulous time. We had some good Wrestle Rocks.
How did you wind up in WCW in the early '90s?
I just went down there and wrestled. I live in Georgia.
Right.
I went down there, and again, I didn't agree with the people in the office, and I'm hardcore. I believe what I believe about my business is solid and real, and I just didn't like the way they were presenting things, and I just did the same thing. I walked out.
Who was in the office at the time? Who was Booker?
You had Dusty was down there, and you had about 4 different guys.
That was
down
the
there.
committee, Cornette and all those guys?
Yeah, and I just didn't really believe in the way it was going, so I bought it. When I don't believe in something, I'm not going to give all my knowledge or my heart to it, and because I believe in giving a good performance, and I didn't want to waste it.
Right. Now, when you went to WCW and you worked there a little bit, they didn't give you a huge push. Was that just because?
Attitude.
Right.
On all parties. I was coming out of Minneapolis territory, and I was very strong about a lot of stuff, and I didn't have to take the bullshit. I could work or not work, and I decided not to.
I guess what made you finally decide to retire? Just you had enough of the business, or?
No, what really made me retire was when I lost my daughter in a car accident, and it just devastated me, and I lost all heart. I mean, I put my boots up, and my 2 boys said, "Daddy, you can't quit," and I said, "I'm quitting," and I did for 7 years, 8 years, and then I started going back on weekends, and my sons liked it, and I got the urge again, so I do it as much as I can.
I was going to ask you now, what do you do now for a full-time living these days?
I work on weekends wrestling. I enjoy it. I love to try and educate the young kids. I think I call them weekend warriors. They don't have a clue, but when they get in the ring with me, I give them the whole picture, and I just eat them up and I beat them hard. And I worked for a guy for 17 weeks, went through 17 guys. And they finally came to me and said, "We can't use no more, Doug." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "You're hurting everybody. You're popping shoulders, you broke a knee, you broke 3 ribs, you popped an ankle and pulled out shoulders." And I said, "Well, they don't know how to wrestle." I said, "I'm not going to look stupid." I said, "They look stupid because I get them in the ring and I eat their ass up.
Right.
And I'm not afraid to do it." That's the way I was taught. So if you go in the ring and you don't know anything, you're going to learn, whether you like it or not. And it doesn't bother me. So
I guess who are your favorite guys and least favorite guys to work with? You pretty much said that you like working with everybody.
I never had a bad itch with anybody. I learned from everybody I ever worked with. Even if I was the one taking charge and doing it, I learned and I made the match what it was supposed to be. And I would use the people. I try to teach them the people. You gotta do this way to get that crowd. And they wouldn't know or try to understand philosophy with psychology in the ring, and they do get lost. So I would have to take it and do it the way it was supposed to be done.
Who was your favorite tag team partner?
Oh, I have to go with Buddy because Buddy and I had so much fun. Randy Rose and I were good, but nothing compared with Buddy. I had Roger Kirby, a great wrestler out of Kansas City. We were partners in Texas. I had McFarland, but that was nothing. But by far, tag was Buddy.
I guess, is there anybody in the business that you thought would have made it really big but never made it?
I don't know about that one. There are a lot of guys out there that I thought would go and do it, and they never did. And that goes back to the partying time, the partying years,
Right.
where everyone was doing coke and smoke and traveling so many miles a week. That's the only way you could live, and it just it became more important. So
I guess, what are your thoughts on all the deaths of the past few years, and which in particular hit you the hardest?
the hardest was Kurt. I mean, I've known Kurt for over 30 years, and Kurt was a good father, a good friend, a great athlete. He loved life, and it really hurt me bad. It just really tore me apart when I heard that happen, because we've been down the road a long time, and he had everything going for me. He had a family, a beautiful family, and all the money he wanted, and he was right there at the top of his career, and boom, it was over. It was hard.
Do you still watch wrestling today?
Yeah, I do, with my son. I watch it to keep up with what they're doing in the shows, and I try and figure it out. And I see stuff I don't like, and I have my opinion. I'm very opinionated about stuff, and I watch it. I even watch Mexican wrestling on the weekends because I love to see what they're doing, and then I compare what they're doing with the other shows, and no one knows what they're doing. So
I was going to ask you, what do you think of the product these days?
It's hard. It really is. No one thinks for themselves. If they had to think for themselves, they'd be in trouble, and that's sad.
What would you change?
What would I change? I throw out the paperwork, the pencils, and tell them, hey, this is your mind, this is the machine, this is the computer. You have to learn to make the computer work and put it all together and put that puzzle back the way it's supposed to be, and not go in sequence. You have, as it happens, spontaneous. They don't have a clue.
I think a lot of the locker rooms would be half empty if they had to do that. But I mean, that's the way it should be done. You're all right.
Well, they wouldn't. The locker room, the kids would be scared.
All right.
Because they'd be lost.
You ever watch UFC and MMA? Are you a fan of Ultimate Fighting?
I watch it. My son loves it, and I'll sit there and watch it. I think it's great. That's some ass-kicking shit.
Would you ever want to write a book?
I've been asked a couple of times. I had someone approach me a couple of years ago about it, and we threw it up in the air a few times. I probably will eventually someday.
Do you still have a big passion for the business?
Oh yeah, I love the business because I believe the fans want to see wrestling. There's people out there that actually want to see mat wrestling and the way it used to be. And I'm told that every time I go to a show. They see it, they hate me, and that's what I want. They hate me, but they respect what I do. And that's what I've always got. When people say, I want to see you get your ass kicked tonight, and I get my ass kicked, but they're going to buy a ticket again and see what happens the next time I go in the ring, because that's what they want. And that's what they're not getting anymore. And the young guys, like I said, I call them weekend warriors in these small states that go out there and do all this off-the-wall stuff, don't have a clue. Me, I like to get in there and tie them up and make them look stupid.
What do you miss most and least about being a full-time wrestler?
The boys and the traveling. The traveling was always hard, but it was always fun. You got a bunch of guys that are a family, and we all are doing the same thing to get to the same thing, and it never changed. I miss it all. I enjoy going on the weekends and wrestle. Going back 320 days a year, I don't think I will go back to that. I like to go back and work with Vince, but we have problems, so you know I'm just old school, and it just won't go. So.
Any regrets?
Any regrets? Yeah, I didn't save all my money. I blew it partying, but I had a damn good time for 35 years. But yeah, just not saving the money that I made, and I had that'd probably be about the only thing I regret. Never change anything that happened in my career. I wouldn't give it up because I had a hard life, a hard road, but I learned what it was all about, and you can't replace that.
I guess some of your favorite ribs we talked a little bit about. What's your favorite one of all time?
Oh, of all time, I had so many though. The Icy Hot was good.
Or even a road story or something that stands out.
Road stories. We used to, Minneapolis, the Sheik. He had a brand new cow. He never drove it anywhere. He always get a ride, and it had the 4 doors where you had to open it this way, so the handles were like that, and we handcuffed them some bitches, and then take off. And he couldn't get in his car, and we used to put the super glue into lock in the winter with 40 below out, and the only way to get your key in, you would have to blow torch it, son of a bitch, get it out, and we used to do all kinds of shit with the cars. Never, if you broke it, we fixed it. That was the honor of the rib. If you can't replace what you do, don't do it. And you know, we used to get itching powder and put them in the pants, and we knew the guy was smart for that, so we get his underwear, his pants, his socks, and we skedaddle, and he go down the road, he's going to be in trouble. We used to do that all the time.
Favorite match?
Favorite match? God, I've had so many. Dory Funk Jr. and I had a title match in Texas one time, and I was scared to death. I paced that dressing room for an hour and a half, and the guy said, "What's wrong? What are you doing? You look crazy." I said, "I'm wrestling Dory." I said, "I've watched this guy all my life," and I went out there and had one of the best matches of my life. And he taught me so much. It was so easy because he was such a professional and such a technician in the ring, and he wasn't going to do anything that would get him hurt. And I was in charge. I was the general, and he allowed me to do whatever I wanted because he knew I wasn't going to hurt him. So yeah, Dory Funk and again Nick Bockwinkel, the two greatest guys I've worked with.
Favorite town?
Favorite town? Ooh, Denver and Vegas, and San Francisco and Miami and Chicago and Milwaukee.
Right.
Those were the best towns because those were our party towns. Frisco was a major party after the show. Denver was, and Vegas was 24/7. We never slept. It's true, you go to Vegas, you don't sleep. But we partied, we drank, and we wrestled hard and partied, and slept on the plane, and then got to the next town and started all over.
Is there anything you wanted to say to your fans that you never had a chance to say before until now?
Hey, I'm back. The Pretty Boy's back. If you want me, get a hold of your local promotion and get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to come down and give you what you want.
Thanks for being here today with us. It was a
It
great
is my
interview.
pleasure. Thank you very much.